Okay, so if anyone was here when I was giving the spiel, this is the pre-session survey. It just kind of helps us get a little bit more information on kind of how the presentation is going to go and things that we can improve on. So it's just helpful for us to kind of keep improving these sessions for y'all. So if you can go ahead and fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. I'll give some time, give like a couple of minutes, and you guys can fill this stuff out. And yeah, and if you fill it out, we enter you guys in for like a raffle to win. It's like a question bank for the MCAT. So yeah, like Spencer said in the chat, like feel free to, I guess, ask any questions in the chat. And there's a couple of us from PreMD that are here, so we can try and answer those questions for you. Okay, and then like while I'm waiting, giving you guys time for the to do the survey, kind of just giving a little rundown of what PreMD is. For anyone who's new here, we are a club on campus at the med school who pretty much is working towards helping applicants navigate like the application cycle, the do's and don'ts of applying to med school, things like that. Usually throughout the year, we have different presentations on various aspects of the application cycle. And so the first one we usually try to do, which is tonight, is going to be like an overview of the application cycle, kind of big picture. And then as the year progresses, we'll have other sessions that we can send out an advertisement for, and those will be more specifically on like the interviews, writing secondaries, letters of rec, things like that. Yeah, that's kind of what PreMD does. We understand that like applying to med school is quite challenging, especially if you've never done it or you don't have kind of anyone in your immediate circle to kind of walk you through the process. So yeah, that's kind of what we're here for and what we hope to do. So with that, we probably can get started. And yeah, so like I said, this is the overview of the application process. So we're going to kind of stay big picture and go through different parts that are important. And then this is kind of just a roadmap of what we're hoping to kind of talk about. And so today is going to be today's going to be the overview of just everything. And then as you see, we have like MCAT, letters of rec, personal statement, things like that, which are very important and relevant to the whole application process. So yeah, just keep an eye out for emails from us in the future. So today, kind of the big chunks of the presentation are going to be like what you can do before the application itself opens, how and what to do for like the main application when it does open, and then what to expect and do once you have submitted your primary application. And so this is kind of like a rough timeline of the application cycle. And so you can see the MCAT you can kind of take at any point. It's just a matter of like having it in before the application cycle closes as far as like consideration of your application. A lot of places you can actually submit your application without the MCAT score being like received yet. But usually a lot of places won't consider or like look at your application until it is submitted. And so it's definitely something that like if you took it in like May or June, you can still submit it, and the school should get it by July, August, and that shouldn't cause a problem. But you definitely want to try to get that done a little early. Also, it's just nice because it's one less thing to worry about, and it kind of gives you a good idea of schools that you could apply to and maybe get a good idea if you're going to be competitive or not. I know personally, like when I was applying to med schools, my MCAT score, which I already had, was kind of a good one data point that I used to kind of create my school list. And so that could be pretty helpful. The primary application itself opens in June. And so that's something that you can, it opens usually in May, and then you can submit it in June. And at a future session, we'll kind of go into the details of it a little bit more, but it's kind of the big picture demographics, your activities, personal statement, things like letters of rec, things like that. And then as you can see, kind of July, August, September, but even into like the fall and the following winter, you can expect to do to work on your secondary applications and complete any of the like additional assessments that you might need for certain schools. Some of them require like judgment testing, or like one of them is called Casper. And so things like that. And then usually August, again, until the next following winter, and even sometimes up until the spring, you can expect interviews and kind of, yeah, the interviews can be pretty much at any point throughout the application season. So now we're going to move on to the pre-application portion. And so this is kind of like the big picture stuff that you're going to want to think of while you're like in undergrad, maybe like when you're a freshman, sophomore, kind of to just build your application. And so kind of the big kind of like go-to things here are like scribing, shadowing, volunteering, doing research in a lab, or doing like clinical research. It doesn't need to be like hard wet lab type of research. A lot of people, go and get their EMT license, or like there'll be a paramedic during this time while they're preparing their application. And because you're going to be doing so many things, it's like pretty helpful to kind of, whether it's a journal or like an Excel sheet, just kind of jot down and keep track of what you're doing, when you're doing it, how many hours, just because those are the type of questions that you're gonna need to know when you're filling out the application, and kind of doing the work beforehand will save you some stress during the actual application portion of the season. And then, yeah, just try to like document like what you're doing. Again, it'll make it easier when you're asked to kind of write a little blurb about what it was, why was it important. And another thing too that is totally equally as important is trying to do like different like leadership roles, whether that's like being a president of a club, or like starting a club, or just doing something that kind of shows you can take on responsibility. That's always a good thing to have on your application. And then another good piece of advice is it doesn't have to be strictly related to medicine all the time, but whatever you do end up doing during this period, one, you kind of want to make sure that you can spin it in some way to show like it's prepared you for like a career in medicine. And again, it doesn't have to be straight like medical field, but just like doing something where it taught you how like good leadership skills and how will you carry that into your future career as a physician. And then also just, it's nice if you can kind of curate the story you're trying to tell. And so just doing activities and opportunities that kind of show, like paint a picture of who you are, what's important to you, just because those things will go a long way during the application process when people are reading your application. And then kind of this is more the immediate period before the application. And so like I was saying, you're going to want to have picked a date for your MCAT. It's really helpful to kind of have a set date so you can kind of build a study schedule and make sure that you're staying on top of that. Just because the MCAT is one part of the application, but it is important nonetheless. And so it's always good to, put the energy and kind of focus that you need for that. And then the letters of recommendation are also really important. Different schools will require different letters. You can expect like a couple of STEM letters of rec are usually a requirement. Some schools will require like specifically a letter from like a humanities professor or a specific type of class, like an upper division bio class or upper division chemistry class. And so that's also something worth looking into before the application process, just so you can kind of make sure that you are getting those appropriate letters, just because it's a little frustrating when you're putting this work in to try to apply to a certain school, and then you get to this portion and you realize that you like don't have a letter that's required for that school, and it can kind of set back the application timeline and add a little bit more stress that otherwise can be avoided. And then the personal statement and activities, these are things that you should try to work on before the application even opens, mostly because they are important to the application. They kind of give the admissions committee a look into who you are as an applicant, and it's, you know, your opportunity to tell your story and why medicine is for you. And so definitely be kind of comfortable with the idea of writing a couple passes of it, sending it off to people who you feel comfortable and you would like value their feedback. And so that's something to, yeah, start drafting, look at the requirements for it. There's usually a character requirement, and kind of just start thinking of like, you know, why do I want to be a doctor? And then this is kind of the portion where like other people in the club, if they have any anecdotes about kind of anything during this period, you guys can hop on and give your 2 cents. If not, I can just kind of power through. But yeah, I mean, as this slide says, don't be time off from to go straight in. Yeah, don't feel the need to go straight into medical school. I personally took 3 years between undergrad and med school, and a lot of people in our class have a very similar kind of timeline. And so I would say more and more it's becoming common that people do actually take time off between undergrad and medical school, and whether that's to do research or, you know, do things to strengthen the application, spend time studying for the MCAT. Some people just like went traveling for a year. Whatever you do, like just, you know, take advantage of that time, try to still have some type of like purpose to it, because a lot of admissions committees will still ask like, what did you do or why did you do that? So it's good to have kind of thought about that. And then don't be afraid to put your hobbies on like the activities portion of your application. Plenty of people will put at least like 1 or 2. I know personally, I think I put running as a hobby, and I explain kind of like how it's important to me, what it means for me. And so, yeah, hobbies are equally as important. Obviously, you don't want to like put only hobbies on your activities list, but it kind of, again, helps contribute to your application as a whole and gives the admissions committee a little bit more information about you. So that was kind of like the pre-application portion. And then, so now moving on to the primary application. So for this one, you're going to need to have had your personal statement completed. And, you know, hopefully you'll have a couple drafts of it by that point and feel comfortable with it. And then same thing with your activities. One advice that I would give is like, it's really important to give time to your personal statement, but don't let that overshadow your activities and extracurriculars, because those are equally as important to yeah, those are equally as important to kind of fill out. And again, they kind of, all of your application is meant to give the admissions committee a look into who you are as a person and why they would want to bring you to their medical school. And so the activities and extracurriculars are an important, and you know, an equally important area to kind of showcase that. And in your activity section, you actually get 3 activities to mark as like most meaningful, and then you'll get a little bit more characters to kind of explain why it was meaningful, what it means to you, and then, you know, obviously how would it help you in medicine, how would it help you as a future doctor, things like that. And then obviously you're going to fill out the application. It's not just the personal statement and activities. There's a lot of tedious like demographic data that goes in. filling out all of your transcript, your grades, you have to manually enter those. At least that's how it was when I did it a couple of years ago, and I feel like it hasn't changed. And so another thing probably would go into like the pre-advice or the pre-application advice is to order a transcript or just have your transcript available just so you have all of those classes, and you'll need it from every school you attended and got a grade for. And so start like collecting those for people if you've gone to a couple community colleges or a couple different universities. It can kind of take a little bit of time to process that stuff. And so having that ahead of time and putting those things in, which can kind of take a long time just because it's, you're manually entering those. It's good to get started on those early. And then once you actually submit your application, it can take about anywhere up to 8 weeks for them to like even process your application. And so that's something that we can get into at like a later session, but that is one of the advantages of submitting your application on the earlier side of when the application opens, just because you'll kind of get in with that initial batch of processing. And usually as the application season goes, more and more people are submitting. And so that processing time kind of becomes more variable. And that's just more time that the admissions committee at these schools is reading other people's applications and sending out interviews for them. And so it's definitely a balance of trying to make a good, like high quality application, but also trying to get it in a timely manner. And so just kind of being cognizant of that and trying to do your best to balance those two things. It's probably no surprise that applying to medical school is quite expensive. And so for specifically for like MD programs, the primary application is $175 for the first school. And then for every school that you apply to, in addition to that, it's $45. And then for the secondary application, those usually range from $50 to $150. And a lot of people will usually get a secondary application back. Some schools, they will do like a GPA screening, or they'll do like certain types of screenings that they'll do to kind of filter out people. But usually a majority of people who submit a primary will tend to get a secondary back. And so those are some costs that you can expect. And then it's a little up in the air for interview travel. A lot of places have continued to do virtual interviews. It started during COVID, and I think the move has been for admissions committees to kind of stick to that format. And so that's something that is actually pretty helpful as far as keeping the costs down. But there are still like second look days and days where the school will usually invite admitted students to come like look at the school, to view it, to tour it. And those are usually out of pocket costs. And so just kind of accounting for that. But kind of like the slide said, you can expect it to be in the thousands. One thing that like I could not stress enough is if you feel like you are in a financial situation that could be like considered for fee assistance, I would just say like apply to this program, even if like you're kind of on the fence or you don't think you would get accepted. Just apply to it. It's like an application, and I think it's like your tax forms. And if you do get in, or if you do get accepted to it, a lot of this stuff is waived. Like they'll waive your MCAT registration fee. They'll give you like free access to the like search engine for all the med schools. And then they waive the primary and the secondary fees. The secondary fees is kind of school dependent, but a lot of places, if you have the fee assistance program, they'll automatically waive the secondary as well. So yeah, it's a very beneficial program. And if you can submit it, I would like really encourage you guys to look into that. And then, so this is kind of just like big picture timeline. So the MCAS application, which is like the MD application, it opens May 2nd. So for this last year, it opened May 2nd, 2023. And then at that point, when it opens, you can go in, you can start adding all your demographic data, you can input all your grades for your transcripts, kind of the things that are maybe a little less like important but still required, and they're kind of tedious. So like I said, just go in there early and kind of knock that out. And then AMCAS submissions, so starting May 30th is when you can actually like submit your application for it to be sent to medical schools. And so this date is kind of the day, like the ideal day that you should try to shoot for. Again, it's like not the end of the world if you get it in a couple of weeks later. As you can see in the third line, like applications aren't even sent to medical schools until June 30th. So even if you submit day one of when the application opens, those applications won't be sent until any medical school until at least the earliest June 30th. And so there's a little bit of wiggle room in the beginning, first, second week of June. And then, as it moves on and on, applications start to kind of pile up, and that's when you can kind of expect for those wait times for the processing to kind of increase. So like I said, important to kind of stay on top of this and be cognizant of all the deadlines, just so anything to try to maximize your chance of getting in the first time. And so talked on it a little bit, but your personal statement's a really big portion of your application. And so the prompt is very vague, and it's intentional, but it's use the space provided to explain why you want to go to medical school. And as you can see, it's the 5,300 characters. And so my advice for this would be to start thinking like now what it is that like what it is that makes you you, what experiences have shaped you to be the person you are today, and also how have those experiences shaped like what kind of physician you want to be, how you want to be a physician. This is kind of your chance for you to be like, this is why I want to be a doctor. And so there's a reason why it's a pretty important aspect of your application. And don't be afraid, like the slide says, like, don't be afraid to be personal. Plenty of people write about a variety of things, whether that's their own experiences with the healthcare system, if they had like a childhood illness, a family member who had something that they went through with them and they experienced, different experiences in like volunteering, whatever it may be. It looks different, for everybody, but it should be personal to you, and it should explain why you want to be a doctor. And so the caveat to like the whole personal thing is just when, it's okay to talk about your grandpa or your mom or your sister and how they had this thing, but like make sure that the story isn't their story. Make sure that it's your story and that you're still writing it in a way that shows how it affected you and how you're changed by it and how you have, become a different person, and how all of those things are going to contribute to you either being a doctor, what type of doctor you want to be, or like cementing the fact that you want to go into the healthcare profession, like a healthcare profession. And so yeah, don't be afraid to get personal. If it's superficial or if it's kind of like very cliche story, it's very apparent when you're reading it. And so just really try to like put meaning in it. And it's really helpful to have people who know you well read your personal statement, because they're the people who are going to be able to read the story and say like, yeah, this is totally you, and everything you're saying in this personal statement is like who I know you are as a person. Or they're going to be like, I don't know what you think you wrote, but like this is not who you are at all. I don't think it highlights any of your like strengths. And so those are some really good people to kind of give you feedback. Usually people tend to have like a colleague, a friend, a professor, or a mentor, be the people who read their personal statements. And I would say like try to get a decent amount of people to read it, but not too much, because you're inevitably going to get like different views as far as like writing styles and personal preferences. And so it's important to take the feedback, but don't let the critiques or their recommendations kind of like take your story part out of it and make sure that it still is like authentic to you. And sometimes when you send it to too many people and there's a lot of opinions, it can get a little murky as far as like what you actually should or shouldn't write about. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Again, the work activity section of the app is really important as well. You're going to have up to 15 spots to put some type of activity. And again, this can be like a hobby. It can be research, leadership opportunities, jobs. So again, it's really helpful to kind of keep track of this stuff in your pre-med years, just because it'll make this part of the application a little easier. And these are the things on the included section that you can kind of expect to like put down. So like the dates that you worked there, what you did, the name of the organization, if it was an organization, and then like the rough estimate, you know, per year or like per allotted time that you said you were involved in that. And then you're going to want to, you're going to want to talk about how these activities impacted you, you know, what things you learned while you were doing these, both good and bad, and how ultimately that's going to contribute to your current growth, but also like how you will take those lessons into your future. And so something that you also can do for that's kind of like a new feature is you can put or include anticipated activities. And so if you're submitting this application in June and you know you're going to start a research project in July and do 6 months of research during the application season, you can actually include that under this activity section, and it's just like an anticipated activity. And so that's also something really helpful, just so you can have activities and you feel like you don't have to, you know, apply without a wide range of different sections. And when you are submitting this, they're going to ask you like what category it falls under. So is it volunteer? Is it a job? Is it leadership? Is it research? And so it's beneficial to have kind of a well-rounded kind of application in this section. And so not just having 15 activities that are all different like research opportunities, you know, it's good to have a couple of leadership positions, a couple of volunteer positions, a couple of research positions. So they want to ultimately see that the person who's applying is well-rounded and they're not just like stuck in a research lab all day. And so that's kind of, again, and these are the sections that you can kind of put each of these entries under. And so as you can see, there's a decent like range of things that you could kind of categorize these as, honors, awards, things like GPA, or like if you graduated with Latin, or like Latin honors, any conferences you attended. So yeah, try to just, when you're crafting this, again, it's all about like crafting a story and crafting an application that showcases like the best of you. And so try to have a decent range of these different categories. And so again, if anyone wants to, any of the other med students want to hop on and just kind of give their piece, you know, feel free to hop on. And if not, I'm more than happy to give my little spiel for this as well.
I'm just having trouble switching on my camera, but yeah, I can jump in for just the primary application. I think you want to make sure that, like, just like what Jacob was saying, make sure that someone reads your application before you like send it in. I know like everyone puts a lot of work in the personal statement, but this part is just as important because it paints a picture of who you are minus like everything else in your personal statement. It just like helps us know who you are, like what you might be interested in the medical school and things like that. So I would definitely say be honest, like don't try to like paint your hours to be something that they're not, because some like medical school admission committees can see like if you're like extending the hours too much. But also don't like, make sure like everything is honestly what you've done, because you're going to get asked about those experiences during your interview. And then yeah, definitely don't say that you just want to help people for your personal statement. I think you have to like really look within yourself and figure out what exactly is driving you to medicine and be specific. I think there's sometimes people make a mistake of making their personal statement just like a list of all the things they've done or a list of their CV, and that's not necessarily what we're looking for. We already have a list of all the things you've done. We want to know what is driving you to medicine, what is like the thing that is going to keep you going when the days get hard.
Yeah, great advice.
The other thing that, what'd you say?
Go.
The other thing that I would say is you guys, like I did this, I would look up other people that got into medical school and see what they would write about and be like, oh, I wrote about all the research I did and all the publications and stuff. All I want to say is that everybody has their own different path and everyone is their own unique individual. Don't try to think that you need to paint yourself as someone that's already gotten into med school or someone says, this is how I got in. You just need to be yourself and show that that's how you became so interested in going into medicine and things like that. And that's what really shines through. It's not so much all of the hours that you did and things like that. It's what makes you as a person and how you want to get into medicine and how that happened. So just be honest and be yourself.
Also on the subject of like personal experiences and like and your most meaningful experiences, don't like think that med schools only care about clinical/science stuff as your most meaningful experience. You can write about anything really. So for mine, I wrote about just music as one of my most meaningful experiences, nothing to do with clinical stuff, nothing to do with science or research, but it was still something that was unique to something that like had a huge impact on myself. And so I was able to talk more about it, and it came off much better than if I had forced myself to write about this volunteering opportunity that I did for like a year and did not have as much of an impact on me. So don't think that you have to like present yourself as this super just like science only single-minded person.
Yeah, I think all of the pieces of advice are very true and very important. I also, another extracurricular I do is I work with admissions. And so I do help a lot of like interviews and interview days and like just meeting people who are applying and getting accepted to the school. And it's like pretty amazing how like wide of an applicant pool gets accepted to medical school, and just like all of the different unique experiences, people who have like complete careers outside of medicine and such like unique experiences that you haven't really seen or heard of before, and how they're still getting into medical school. And so I think it's honestly really beneficial to kind of be unique, because when these admission committees are reading these applications, like they're going to see a lot of people with like the standard checklist of like research activities, this, but it's like the stories that are unique that they're not seeing a lot of, those are the ones that stand out. And so definitely don't be afraid to like pursue your interests and your passions, especially if it becomes really apparent that you can tell a story about those interests, and kind of, present an application that is cohesive and unique. So now we will comment or talk about the MD PhD aspect of medical school. And so this is a track basically that you can take where people will go and get like 2 degrees at once. It's a PhD obviously, and then your medical degree. A lot of the time it's going to be some combination of like, you'll do your first 2 years of medical school with your class, and then you'll leave med school and do your PhD dissertation kind of thing. You'll finish that, and then you'll come back to medical school, and you'll finish either the 3rd or 4th year, depending on when you left. And then when you're done, you have your PhD and your MD. And so this is definitely a really cool path if you're interested, if like research is something you're really interested in, and you can think of a way in which you want to pursue something in medicine that is pretty research heavy, or you have a really big passion for research and it's something you want to pursue even as you're getting your medical degree. Definitely something to consider. The downside to this is that it's just long. It's much longer than the typical medical 4 years of medical school. And so it's definitely a little bit more of an investment. And this also requires a couple more essays, as you can see here, and it's the why are you interested in the MD PhD, and then it's like describing your research experiences that you've had. And so this is, you know, a case in which you are going to, like, you actually will need research experience because you need to talk about it during this application. And so you don't, you know, this is not to say you need research in, like, I got into medical school and I didn't do like a lick of research, but specifically for the MD PhD program, research is definitely a must. And then this is kind of the big picture timeline. It's a little different, as you can see from the general timeline that we kind of went over already. And if this is something you're interested in, like, this link on the bottom is something you can look up and get a little bit more information on. And so kind of everything we've been talking about up until this point has been geared more towards the AMCAS, like the MD program application. And so the this application is for the DO schools. And so there's like some slight differences that as you can see, the activities are a little bit less in how many characters you can do, but there's no limit to the amount of activities you can put. The personal statement is the same length. Letters of rec, pretty standard, pretty very similar. The only caveat to that being that they usually like to see that you have a letter of rec from a DO doctor. And so something to, you know, if you're interested in the DO program, something to consider early on, just so you can kind of identify that DO doctor and try to you know, try to get a letter of rec from that. And then are also on here, kind of a similar format, a bigger amount for the first program, and then a smaller amount for each successive application you submit. And again, there's a fee waiver, and then the same thing, there's secondaries, and those also have a cost associated with them. And so this is, you know, an equally valid career path and choice, and a lot of people will usually apply to both an MD school and a DO school. Some people, you know, exclusively apply to DO schools. Ultimately, like, you can do the same things as far as like a medical career. And so I think generally, or like in the past, there's kind of been a little bit of like a stigma against DO schools, but like in reality, they truly are, like, it's the same residency programs that you're applying to now. You can take like the same licensing exams as a DO student. You can still take like the USMLE licensing exams, and so there's no like limit really to like what you're able to do. And so these are equally you know, valid choices. And then Texas has its own kind of medical system that's unique in that way. It is a little bit more different than either of the other two applications. And so as you can see here, the personal essay is a little bit less than the character limit. Usually, from what I heard, people just kind of still do the 5,300 like MD or DO application, and then they'll edit it kind of down and to kind of fit that 5,000. It's not like they're writing two completely separate essays. And then again, this one has 2 additional essays, with the second essay being optional. And they the activities are a little bit less characters depending on what category you assign it. And the MCAT, there's a little bit more wiggle room. Generally, it tends to be 3 years, but with these schools, it can be 5 years. And then something also unique to the Texas medical schools is when you are applying and going through that process, it's not like a lot of the other, like the MD and the DO schools, you know, you apply, you get an interview possibly, and then you get a letter, like an acceptance letter, and then you have the choice to decide if you're going to go there or not. For the Texas schools, the way it works is that it's kind of like a match process, kind of similar to like residency match, where the schools themselves will rank applicants, the applicants will rate the schools, and then they do like the math and the numbers, and like they match applicants, and that's kind of how it works. And so there's a little maybe less control over that, but ultimately you would still be applying to schools that you would be okay attending anyway. And so it's not, in my opinion, not too big of an issue, but it is a little different than the other applications. And this one just has a flat fee of 215. And because of that, there's no like fee waiver associated or available. But it is just like a one-time fee of the 215. And so these are a couple different military pathways that are common for people attending medical school. So the first one is the Health Profession Scholarship Program. So basically people go into medical school, they apply, they get in, and then they sign up for like a branch of the military. And as like kind of like a trade-off to that, they get their cost of like attendance to a medical school covered in exchange for like the service or the commitment to the military. And that could be anything. I have friends who are in our class who are in the Air Force. I know some people who are in the Army. And so it kind of just depends on what branch you are interested in. But yeah, it's a very great opportunity, and it's a good way to like get the cost of medical school covered. The second one is the loan repayment program. And so for this one, the way it works is you you go to medical school, you finish medical school, and then you are going to a residency that, like the slide says, has like an area of shortage determined by the US, like the VA system. And again, another way to help cover the cost of medical school. And then the last one is the Uniformed Services University. And so this one is like an actual medical school through like the armed forces, where you will go to one of these, you go to the university as part of like under the government, and you are in either the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and then you get your cost of tuition covered. You have a full salary and benefits, and then you also get like a ranking, like a military ranking. And so all, equally valid opportunities to consider. From what I've heard, the general kind of advice is that like if joining the military is something you could picture outside of the financial benefits, this is something like really that could be really great to consider. But yeah, kind of just thinking twice if you want to do this. The financial aspect of it sounds really nice, but just kind of being cognizant of like the commitment to the military and what that looks like time wise and location wise, and if you have a family. And so there's a little bit more factors that go into things like this. But yeah, like I said, definitely know a decent amount of people who are who are pursuing that route. And so this is the last portion, is kind of like what you're going to do after you submit the primary application. And so something that is like a very common piece of advice is to start working on the secondary questions, like as soon as you finish the primary, or even like while you're kind of working on the primary. Obviously you want to kind of focus on the primary first, but the secondary questions there's a decent amount of them. And like I said, you get a lot of secondaries back from a lot of the schools you apply to. And so you're going to kind of start to feel a little overwhelmed with how many responses you're getting back. And so it only kind of helps you in the long run to kind of get a head start on those. And a really great resource you can look for is the Student Doctor Network, which I'm sure many of you have already kind of browsed that website. Normally, I would say like try to stay off of Reddit and Student Doctor Network, just because it can get a little like overwhelming, and it's not 100% reflective of like everyone's experience. But for this specific aspect, they usually will list all of the previous secondary questions that each school has. And secondary questions rarely change year to year. And so you can look them up and kind of see what questions were asked last year and kind of try to get a head start on those, just so you can, not be so overwhelmed when you get to that point. And also it helps, general rule of thumb, a lot of people will kind of give the advice of when you get a secondary, try to send it back within 2 weeks, just to kind of keep the application cycle moving for your application. And so if you have these if you have these filled out beforehand, it kind of helps expedite that. Again, important as well. So like maybe not as extensively, but I would still like, I had a friend look over some of my secondary responses just to make sure like grammar wise or like that I was answering the question. That's really important. A lot of times like people will just write something and they don't really answer the question being asked. And so make sure you're just doing that. And then kind of commented on it earlier, but things like Casper, Snapshot, Duet, these are situational assessments or like judgment tests. They're kind of just assessing different like how you would respond to different like scenarios, whether that's ethical or moral, or kind of just see where you fall as far as how you respond to certain situations. They're not like medical oriented in nature. So like it's not asking you, you know, how to manage people medical problems. It's asking like pretty situational questions. And so yeah, good to kind of think of that, get ready for that, make sure you're looking up school requirements because some schools will need these, some don't. And so when you're looking and you're kind of making your school list, make sure that you're kind of keeping these things in the back of your mind. And then, yeah, kind of get ready for interviews. Everything kind of just keeps rolling in. And so you'll send your primary, you'll get secondaries, and you'll secondaries, and then, you know, hopefully you'll get an interview offer. And so try to get started on that. You know, a lot of places are Zoom, but still make sure you have like a nice outfit, at least from the waist up. And you can start planning like, okay, like I need a quiet area for 4 hours this day. So kind of figuring out where that will be, figuring out any like logistics, if you're in like a different time zone, things like that. And then, yeah, if you need to travel, start kind of considering those travel costs and trying to account for that at this point in the application. And then there's a lot of websites that have common interview questions. I'm sure you guys have seen many. It's, you know, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a doctor and not a nurse? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about a challenge. Typical interview questions, but also some interview questions that are unique to medical school. And then if the opportunity is there, you know, try to do like mock interviews with your career center in undergrad, or some schools will offer like to alumni, they'll offer these services as well. And so any opportunity you can to just practice talking with somebody and being a little bit natural, it's only going to be beneficial in the long run. And so, like I said, Student Doctor Network, if you just type in like, you know, CU Anschutz Student Doctor Network, it'll come up and they'll usually list out the questions and what year the questions are from. And so again, it's nice to kind of get a jump start on this if you have the time at any point in your application season or application cycle. It's definitely kind of like one of those things where it's a marathon and not like a sprint. And so just kind of chipping away at these things over time and making sure you're staying on top of the application, it's only going to help you in the long run. And these are what kind of typical secondary prompts will look like. So, you know, how can you contribute to diversity? If you're taking a gap year, what do you plan on doing? Why do you want to go to their school? And, you know, the list goes on and on. You can see some of them here. So yeah, I would just, you know, try to start thinking of these things, and specifically like the why our school, that's a really important one when you're making your school list. Like truly try to find schools that you could see yourself going to and have some aspect that is actually interesting to you, because the why our school question is a really common question, and it becomes a lot easier to answer when you've like done your research on the school and you really have a valid reason as to why you want to go there. Whether it's like a unique curriculum, unique opportunities, a hospital they're affiliated with, whatever it may be. You know, important to kind of figure that out early on. But these are kind of some of the questions you can expect. And some of the questions are going to be like completely rando, and a little like quirky. Like I had one that was like, what's your favorite song and why? Or like, if you were a plant, which one would you be? Like they kind of range from like pretty random to pretty conventional questions. And so kind of just be ready for that. And kind of big picture timeline for that June 30th date, when like the schools will start to send the applications, or the schools will get the applications and they'll just kind of like start rolling out the secondaries. And so you can kind of expect it in that general timeline. Again, you want to complete them as soon as possible. My advice would be to create like a spreadsheet and kind of, you know, what school it is, when you receive the secondary, when you want to give it back, and then like what questions are asked for that. Just because as you start getting more and more secondaries, having an Excel sheet where you're kind of keeping track with all of that, it's only going to help you stay on top of like these kind of 2-week windows. And then also it'll help you see like a lot of secondaries are repeated between schools. And so several schools will ask like, what can you offer to diversity? And if you've already answered one of them for a different school, it's really easy to kind of go through your sheet, see that you've answered it, pull that prompt, and then kind of tweak it a little bit, and then send it in. So trying to save yourself some work when you can. And then interviews can start as early as August if you're kind of like on top of that and you're in like that first wave. But they is late into the next year as like February. And you know, you want to, if you get an interview offer, try to schedule that ASAP. They usually are only offered like on certain days of the week. And so the longer you wait, it can get pushed out even more. And, you know, those are days and seats where people are meeting other applicants before you. And so the sooner you can be in front of an admissions committee, the better it's going to be for you. And so just try to stay on top of scheduling those interviews pretty quickly. And yeah, one thing on the interviews also, sometimes you'll have an interview and you'll hear something a couple weeks later. Other times you can have an interview and hear something like months later, or, you know, have your application deferred or be put on a wait list. There's a lot of different outcomes that can happen after an interview. And even though the interviews stop in February, there is still like a lot of activity from an admissions point of view that happens like into the spring and summer months. And so this is to say that like, don't give up hope if you're on wait lists, or if you're only on a wait list in February. A lot of people will, you know, drop their application or pick other schools over certain schools, and that frees up space. So definitely, you know, be ready for kind of a quick change in like waitlist status versus accepted. And just kind of, you know, don't lose hope early on in the cycle. And then yeah, if anyone wanted to give another little anecdote, feel free to. And if not, I can give my 2 cents. But yeah, this is pretty much kind of what I was just talking about. Try to write as many pre-write as many secondaries as you can. Don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's like people who are also applying to this, you know, medical school that cycle, people who have applied previously and been successful. If you have like a mentor who's like a physician, you know, have them offer any advice. Career centers, anyone who, you know, kind of has an idea of what these admissions committees are looking for and can kind of help you steer you in that right direction. I like personally, I had a friend, like a friend of a friend, who went to med school and who used to be on like an admissions committee for a school. And she kind of just, you know, gave me advice, and I would send her my secondaries and my personal statement. And she, you know, would kind of give me little tips here and there. But yeah, anybody who can kind of help, you know, guide you in a direction, who has prior experience or who's going through a very similar experience, definitely worth kind of having in your corner. And then here's kind of just like a list of helpful resources. and kind of what they're used for. The MCAS obviously is the application, the MSAR, that was like the medical school search engine that I was referring to. It's very, very helpful. It has like all of the different information for the medical schools, like demographics, acceptance rates, requirements, like anything you could think of when it comes to that medical school, it's there. Without the fee assistance program, I think it's like 30 to 50 bucks, somewhere around there. But if you do apply for the fee assistance and you get it, it's free. And then these are just some of the other kind of resources and stuff that we talked about. Again, we will send the or the slideshow is available like on or will be available to you guys, and so don't feel the need to like jot this down or anything. This PowerPoint will be available and you guys can go and look through any of these links if you need to. But yeah, that's kind of sure. I know it's a lot and I know it seems overwhelming, kind of why we have like more topics in more detail, just because like we can talk about these pretty extensively. And so, yeah, this is a post-session survey. And so very similar to the first one, that kind of just helps us gauge like how effective this meeting was, what was useful, what wasn't useful. And so it kind of just helps, you know, only helps us improve and helps further or helps, you know, the next kind of wave of applicants. So I will leave this link here. I think that's the last, yeah. I will leave this link here and give you some time to fill it out.